Hey guys, it's your best five friends. I'm Kelsey. That's Rachel. Rachel, we had a guest on our show.
Kelsey interviewed his
cohort. I call it my cohort. Is that
cohort over at
my partner in crime at Heavy?
Heavy, last year hired two people to cover
the best two people in the world they could find.
UFC specifically, maybe more broadly MMA combat sports in general, but UFC specifically, and that was you and
Stephen McCaugherty.
Yeah.
Heavy.
And so Kelsey interviewed Stephen, and what did you guys talk about?
We talked about the return of Nick Diaz. People love the Diaz brothers. Nick Diaz is from a long time ago, and he's going to fight again. And so I wanted to get Stephen's expert opinion on.
Yeah, and I already saw the interview and edited it, and I learned a lot from Stephen. I was really glad to hear his perspective and his knowledge. Enjoy this interview, and thanks for being our best fight friends.
Here I'm here with Stephen McCaugherty. He's my cohort over at Heavy. We like to call ourselves the Disruptors. Maybe Stephen doesn't know that. I call us the Disruptors because I think we're doing a great job, Stephen. We're killing it. So I couldn't wait to have you on our show, Real Talk with Kelsey and Rachel, talk about Nick Diaz's return. Who saw this coming, and how excited are you about it?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me come on, and I like the name Disruptors for sure. I like that a lot. Yeah, man, I remember seeing, because it was reported by ESPN's Zero Helwani, and I remember seeing that. I'm like, my first thought was kind of like probably most people's in the MMA community, like, oh, Nick Diaz is saying he's going to come back again. And how many times have we done this song and dance with Nick Diaz? But when you read the report and you see the video of Nick Diaz, he looks good. Looks really good. And it sounds like he put in a 14-week regimen. So looking at that, I got pretty excited about it. Yeah. And then when you look, because he's, I guess, wants to go back to welterweight, which is a good spot for him. And you kind of look at all the potential matches. It's like, man, like this can be a lot of fun with Nick Diaz.
Yeah, and I'm really, like, you had a lot of great ideas about who maybe he could fight. So tell us some of the bigger fights or the better fights that you think Diaz could possibly end up in during his comeback.
First of all, it kind of depends on what the UFC, how do they look at Nick Diaz? Are you going to just be putting in, he's a big pay-per-view star. He can headline any UFC fight night, UFC on ESPN, easy. If you're going to put him on a pay-per-view, if he has the right dance partner, he could headline the pay-per-view as well, right? Yeah. So it depends on what the UFC wants to do with him and what kind of clout he still has. Now, I could see the UFC wanting to slot him into the top 5 right away. And if you do that, you have a few options there, right? Like you have Leon Edwards, who's on this ridiculous win streak, says he wants to fight again soon. He says he wants to fight in 2020. Nick Diaz says he doesn't want to come back till 2021, but maybe you can find something that works there. Or you could do the winner of Colby and Tyron Woodley. Now that's if the UFC wants to put him to the top 5. Do I think he's going to have an easy time fighting any of those guys? No, it's going to be tough. Putting him against Leon Edwards, especially not fighting since 2015, it's going to be a tough night. Now, there's a lot of other fun fights for Nick Diaz, and it really depends, I guess. Yeah, like I said, what the UFC wants to do with him, as well as what Nick Diaz wants. If he's wanting to get the biggest payday possible, I mean, there's a couple massive fights out there. Start with obvious Conor McGregor.
Woo!
I mean, could you imagine that buildup?
Yeah, I know. I can't. Like the promotional hype for that. Even when Conor tweeted about it, I was like, yeah, that's perfect because of the rivalry with his brother. And then these guys, that would be a great fight.
The older brother stepping in. Would Conor come back to fight Nick Diaz? I don't know. To me, it seems like he's really waiting for this lightweight title matchup between Gaethje and Khabib. But I mean, just from a pay-per-view standpoint, an excitement standpoint, that's massive, massive fight. So you could see that happen. Another interesting, fun fight would be if we have Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz talking about a fight, right, in January or December, depends on what outlet you look at. If Jorge Masvidal beats Nate Diaz, it would be pretty intriguing to have then the older brother step in, Nick Diaz, to fight Jorge Masvidal next.
Yeah, and that, if I recall correctly, that was the original genesis behind earlier this year when he said that he wanted to come back. He was angry at Masvidal for talking about baptizing his younger brother. And that promotion also, I think, would have been amazing. I love when there's like big stars. I don't want to see Nick Diaz in a fight against Leon Edwards. Sorry, Leon Edwards. I want to see Nick Diaz against Conor McGregor or Jorge Masvidal, because the story of that fight would just be insane to me.
I agree with you. If a 37-year-old Nick Diaz is coming back, I want to see him in the biggest fights possible, and not from a ranking standpoint. I'm talking about pay-per-view, like mega star fights. So that would be a Masvidal, that would be a Conor McGregor. There's some real fun, fan-pleasing fights that you could put on with Nick Diaz as well. And you can put him against a few of his own kind of generation of fighters. So there's Robbie Lawler, he's out there. They fought back in like 2004, I think it was. And Nick Diaz got that clean knockout, like super highlight reel knockout. That would be fun to do. Especially, like Lawler's on this skid right now. But, he's still not too bad. Like he hung in there with Neil Magny, right? Like Neil Magny is a tough out for anyone in that division.
Yeah.
And, he took that fight on very short notice. Robbie Lawler did. And, the fight didn't go his way, but
I wouldn't say that. At a super high level to be able to do that is amazing, especially considering how long he's been a fighter and all the damage that he's taken over the years.
And that's the crazy thing. This rematch would be a rematch from a fight in 2004. How crazy is that?
It's crazy how far back Nick Diaz goes, because in reality, this guy hasn't won a fight since 2011. He beat BJ Penn, and that was back when that was a big win. That's a long time. Like, he hasn't competed at any level. Now, I know those guys are always training and always working out. You see stuff on Instagram. They're pretty active in the community. They're rolling all the time on the mats and doing all that stuff. So I have no doubt that he can come in and put on a show. But it's a different thing to get into a cage fight at the highest level of the sport. Honestly, like, that's why I think it would behoove the UFC to put him in the biggest fight possible and just hope for the best.
I tend to agree with that for sure. Or what you could do, and actually this is a side point here, because his last win was versus BJ Penn, where that was quite a meaningful thing at that point. And before that, he was on a 10-fight win streak. People tend to forget that.
Yeah.
Right? He came into the UFC again, right? He fought in the UFC for a while, and then he moved on to different promotions. But he came into the UFC as the welterweight Strikeforce champion. He was on this crazy win streak. He beat Paul Daly. He beat a few big names. Comes in, beats BJ Penn, and his losses. If you look at his losses, his last 3 losses, and I know this was a long time ago, but he lost to Carlos Condit in a very, in a controversial way. Like, it went to decision, and there's fans that will to this day fight to the death saying that Nick Diaz won that fight. All right. And then he lost to George St. Pierre. Many regard him as the greatest fighter ever, definitely the greatest welterweight ever. And then he lost to Anderson Silva in a bizarre fight. So, his loss, although he hasn't won in a long time, his losses aren't like the worst losses. And I know he hasn't fought for 5 years or whatever it is now. So who knows where he's at. But so I think now going back to my original point here, kind of jumping around, talking about putting him against somebody from his generation, I think what a really interesting fight would be him versus Dan Hardy. And Dan Hardy called him out. Dan Hardy hasn't fought for a minute either. He's been out for a real long time. So it'd be kind of interesting if Dan Hardy's been teasing a comeback for a long time now. And he said, probably about a year ago, probably more than that, he told, I believe it was MMA Junkie, that he was going to rejoin the USADA testing pool soon. Who knows? I haven't heard much about that since, but he's been teasing a comeback for a long time. And he then called out Nick Diaz when the news broke that Nick Diaz was thinking about coming out of retirement. So that would be kind of a fun fight. Does it sell a million pay-per-views? No. But for the hardcore fans, I think that would be a really fun scrap.
I'm excited about whenever big stars want to fight. And Nick Diaz, Nate Diaz, the Diaz brothers, these guys are stars. So the last thing I wanted to ask you, Stephen, is why do people love these guys so much? Because, man, people love the Diaz brothers. What do you think it is about them?
They're just as raw and real as it gets. It has to be their fighting style as well, right? Like they get into dog fights and they don't back down whenever they're inside the octagon. I just think that people like that they seem very genuine. They're not characters because they're themselves, but it's they're just different than anyone else in the UFC. It's cool that there are two brothers as well, right? Like it's very rare to have two high-level fighters that are brothers that compete in the same organization. So I don't know. What do you think?
It's just their authenticity, right? I feel like these guys are the same. When if you saw them on the street or just bumped into them, they act the same when the cameras are on as when the cameras are off. And that's a kind of a rare thing, I think. I've not observed that a lot in the world. So I think to go along with what you said, yeah, it's because of the way they fight. People love the way they fight. I mean, but also because they're just real. And people love when people are real.
For sure. Yeah. And it's exciting. And it's a cool layer if Nick Diaz does come back, like Nate Diaz was always known as Nick's younger brother, right? And that's well known and well documented. But it's kind of a different story now. Nate Diaz is the superstar, right? He's the, top 5 star in the UFC right now. So, it kind of makes you think, so what is Nick Diaz's main reason for wanting to come back, right? And I'm sure probably maybe an element of that. He's seen how successful his brother is and the amount of money I'm sure his brother's made compared to Nick Diaz.
I think we definitely need more Diaz brothers in our lives. I think the people, I don't think the people knew that they needed Stephen McCaugherty and Kelsey McCarson's work at heavy, but I think they know now. What do you think, Stephen?
Yeah, they need that. We are what are we, the Devastators?
The Disruptors.
The Disruptors.
Or the Devastators, whatever.
The Devastating Disruptors. I love it.
I'm really grateful that you would come on our show. I'm grateful to work with you at Heavy. And we'll leave your social media stuff down below. You guys can see it out. Follow us. Read our work. Help us out. We're taking over the world. He's Stephen McCaugherty. I'm Kelsey McCarson, and this was Real Talk.